Hiya, it's me Dan, I'm an animator, and this is Video Game Animation Study, and we're looking at a slightly different topic this time, parallax. It's not explicitly animation, but it's a visually moving aspect of games that I'd argue greatly enhances the experience and makes games seem a lot prettier. So let's take a little look at the beauty of parallax in games. So, what is parallax? Parallax in games, called parallax scrolling, is where the background moves at a slower pace than the foreground, giving the illusion of depth. You might notice this in real life if you're staring off into the distance on a bus or train, and you're staring at the same hill for ages even though you're moving at like 60 miles an hour. It's the same in video games, and the speed in which the background moves affects how far away it seems. A quick and vague history lesson then. Actual background scrolling was a thing Golden Age cartoons began doing, using large rigs with layers of glass and a camera, particularly in scenes with sweeping panoramas. Obviously not every cartoon did this, but those that did looked just that bit more gorgeous. Video games probably started dropping in parallax scrolling around the third generation, thereabouts, but it tended to use a lot of memory, so was either basic or limited, though it wasn't absent completely, and there were tricks around it. Platform games in particular tended to use flat static backgrounds, so when a game had parallax scrolling it looked bloody awesome. Parallax became common from the 16-bit era onwards, and it was fairly uncommon to see a flat-looking platform game. Even top-down adventure games used it in interesting ways to signify a vast cliff edge or a drop. Some platform games in the 32-bit era still used basic 1 or 2 layer scrolling backgrounds, but as time and hardware have progressed, so have technical capabilities, making parallax scrolling an almost natural aspect of many 2D games, practically a non-issue in 3D games, and usually being omitted or restricted in modern games as an aesthetic choice. So what does parallax do? Well, as mentioned before, it helps convey a sense of depth, and using more layers of parallax will push that perception of depth further. Why add visual depth to a game? Depth helps convey a believable sense of space for your character to explore, and this in turn contributes to the immersiveness of gameplay, and thus your enjoyment as a player and consumer. That's not to say that games without parallax offer any less depth in terms of immersiveness or your enjoyment as a player. On the rare occasion, parallax can be handled in perhaps not the best way, and it can be disorienting and distracting. Okay, so let's have a look at some examples and study them. Donut Plains, Labyrinth Zone and Norfair. These all have one layer of parallax, which is fine. If you care a little more about immersiveness, then these might come across as just big flat walls some way back from the stage platform. It's simple, but creates a sense of space which would otherwise be missing on a completely flat looking screen. Games like Kirby's Adventure and Bucky O'Hare on the NES are some of the earlier examples of platform games having relatively accomplished parallax scrolling of 2, 3 or even more layers. This is beginning to feel a lot more like the background is further away, with each layer seemingly an equal distance apart, almost extruding the playable area back into the game. Now I know a lot of people are fed up with it, but Green Hill is one of my favourite stages in any game. And it's because it has a believable space. There's 2 layers of hills in the background, a couple layers of clouds, but it's the lake that really lifts this believability. It has this almost faux 3D effect that stretches from the base of the nearest hill right up close to the stage platform. It helps that the water is animated too. Those waterfalls in the background match the ones you walk over, making it easy to imagine that what is right here is also far over there. See, if we compare what Green Hill could look like with a flat background to the much deeper background, there's a greater sense of space that can be explored beyond what you actually can, and this is missing when there's only one moving layer. Okay, so how about vertical scrolling? Shinobi 3 for the Mega Drive has this great section where you're falling down this canyon, and the sides seem to stretch right back to the edges in the distance, and it really feels like you're in this thin crevice in a mountain. This is the sort of effect I think would work in places like Norfair, particularly down the main shaft. it'd add to that depiction of a cavernous lava pit. An earlier stage in Shinobi has a similar effect when going up as well. In fact, Shinobi 3 manages parallax scrolling really well, putting it to good use in boss fights and other sections to let subtle storytelling elements play out in the background, something which wouldn't feel the same were the background to be flat. I think if we compare this to maybe Streets of Rage, you can kind of see the difference I'm talking about. A particular favourite example of mine is this part in Symphony of the Night. When you first enter, the background looks a bit of a flat mess, but when you start walking past it, man, it just comes alive with depth, quite literally when you see a creepy huge eye staring at you from the distance. Okay, so how could we project depth forwards as well as backwards? Muramasa Demon Blade, as well as having many layers of parallax going back, also has a few foreground elements which move faster than the stage platform, appearing in front of where you're playing, giving the impression of being closer. Sonic games have been pretty good in extruding the depth forwards as well as backwards, like in Starlight Zone. Donkey Kong Country has bananas in battle arenas that seemed closer than in other stages. You don't necessarily always need something literally close to the screen. You can have a few layers to make it seem like, say, the ground is stretching right up to the screen, like here in Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap. And this is another particularly good example. When we begin to look at all of this together, what you have is a real set piece for immersiveness. And throw in animated elements to these scrolling layers, and wham, you've got a dynamic environment. Now, are there examples of parallax being handled either badly, weirdly, or even just lazily? One thing that's always going to come across as disorientating is when a background is static. From a logical sense, it should mean that the thing is infinitely far away, that any movement our end won't result in any movement of the background, like a night sky for example. Sometimes it technically makes sense, like in Death Egg Zone here, but it often results in it looking a bit strange. Having a static back layer after many other layers is fine, because it almost draws your eye to the back and it's a bit more believable. But static on its own, that's confusing. It doesn't even have to be static in both directions. Sometimes it'll look fine from side to side, but it won't scroll up and down, and that can also have a bit of a disorientating effect. Okay, so this one from Jim Power, the Lost Dimension for the Super NES, is particularly strange if you're not sure what's going on. As we can see, the furthest background layer is moving the fastest in the opposite direction, with these middle layers moving slowest. That is literally the opposite of what we've experienced so far. So what's this about? Instead of our imaginary box of layers with a camera at the front, what's happening here is we actually have a cylinder, and we're looking at the closest edge as the main platform, with the opposite side of the cylinder as the furthest layer of the background. And the centre of the cylinder are the middle layers, and the camera is rotating around the centre. It's a neat idea, but is a difficult thing to make sense of visually if you're not quite sure of the context. A similar idea is used in the Metal Sonic boss fight in Sonic Mania. I do apologise for all the Sonic footage, but honestly these guys seem to understand it really well most of the time. It seems to make a bit more sense in this case because as you're running with Metal Sonic you're kind of going around this big pillar thing, so you are literally running around it with the background moving the opposite direction. That makes sense. I'd definitely like to see more of this type of parallax scrolling. This fight against Volt Kraken tries this little idea, almost using the inverted vertical scrolling, but it doesn't quite work. But I would like to see this tried out. Also, I have no idea what's going on with these bushes in Aquatic Ruin Zone. It's like they're moving at a completely different speed, but you go through them, I don't know. Okay, so that's that from me. There are plenty of examples I didn't cover. There are so many lovely examples out there. Do feel free to comment your own for others to seek out and enjoy right here. If you enjoy this content, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. All the recording, editing, animation and general production takes a lot of time and effort during the wee hours I have available. And thanks to these splendid guys for funding this episode. Love you, bye.